So that's that. We went on deployment with a strong bunch of pipe hitters. All right. So we get on deployment. You guys, we kind of, and this is something Tony and I talked about. We were task organized, and we changed it on a fairly regular basis. Okay, right. You know what? This area is getting hot. We need more guys over there, and we would just kind of.
There's a lot to do.
There's a lot to do. There's a lot of work to be done.
There was a lot.
A lot of bad guys. When you look back and you're kind of, so now you're on your first combat deployment, what was the thing that struck you as, damn, like, okay, this is what, because I'll tell you, people ask me that, and like the first firefight I got in on my first deployment to Iraq, and honestly, I was like, okay, I felt like I was 100% prepared.
I agree completely.
And I was like, okay, cool. Yeah. Hey, guys, it's just very simple, very straightforward.
So some guy said to me one time, and this is an outside guy, and he goes, "God, it seems to me that in the SEAL teams, you guys do stress inoculation really well." And so I would say yes, because that was exactly my same first firefight I got in. I was like, no big deal. Yeah. And look, when the rounds are close, right? Like what that sounds like. And they're really close, and it's no big deal. By the way, it's not really very loud when they're shooting at you, right? I mean, you hear a certain sound. But then, of course, you fire a maneuver, and it gets a little bit loud. But that's awesome. It's just like every drill we've ever done. And it was no big deal. It was almost habit at that point. You knew exactly the maneuver. So no big deal. The first time I went out in a Humvee in Ramadi, so keep in mind, like you said on the introduction, when we got there, guys were getting IED'd and killed every single day. Every day the message traffic came over, and it was KIA. IED. So first Humvee ride I go out in, and I'm looking out the window. And by the way, like, you can't really roll these windows down. It's not like you can. You don't want to roll these windows down. No, by the way,
they're bulletproof windows, so you want to keep them up.
Right. And so like you actually can't shoot back if you want to. Right. The only guy who can shoot back is your turret gunner. And for the first, like, I would just say minute and a half, I was like wincing. I was like waiting for this clack to go, boom, boom, and then finally I was like, you know what? There's nothing I can do about it, and I literally let it go right then. So that was like, that's a strong memory. Like, I remember, even for all the training, and again, the first firefight was no big deal, and but driving down in a Humvee, sitting in the back, completely helpless. I mean, you have two choices, and life is a lot like this. You can sit there and worry yourself away about it. Well, is it this intersection? Is it this intersection? Or just go, you know what? Here's the deal. I can't control it. So I'm just going to be ready. So when it's my time to bust out this door or do whatever we got to do an immediate action drill or whatever, I'm ready to do it. And the rest of it, you just let go. You let go, because anything else is not effective.
Yeah, you're not. Yeah, it's not only just are you worried, but now you're actually doing things bad. You're
Correct.
Actually being negative. You're
right.
Thinking about things that you shouldn't be thinking about, and it's not helping you. It's not helping your team. So I like that. Just to kind of sum up what you said, you were in Ramadi for 6 months. You were scared for about 1 minute and 30 secones.
Yeah,
and after that, you're like, all right. And I think
Whatever.
that's the attitude that. I think that's the best. I don't know if this is the right thing to say or not, but to accept the fact that there's things you can't control, that you cannot control, and that one of those things is, an IED, a sniper bullet.
Yep.
I mean, and now there's things that you can do to influence, because guess what? We do training, we prepare, we're keeping our eyes peeled, we're taking routes that we know have been cleared to the best of our ability. When we're on the street, we're moving from cover to cover. We're doing everything that we can. But guess what? It doesn't matter.
That's
you
right.
can do everything right, and it doesn't matter.
Yep.
You can still get blown up. You can still get shot. That's the way it is. So if you sit around and just think about that all the time, it's just going to drive you crazy, one.
Yep.
And number two, it's going to make you do your job worse, because you're going to be less aggressive. And I think you got to stay aggressive to stay alive. You want to be aggressive. You want to be, you know what? Yeah, we'll go make that happen. Oh, do I want to sit in the vehicle right now, or get out and get some ground? I mean, that's just the type of thing that
It's a mindset.
It's a mindset that wins.
That's it. It's the winning mindset. And if your goal is to win, then you have to recognize that certain thought processes are not effective, and they take away from your ability to win. And I see people get worried about stuff, that kind of thing, right? So you take a step back. I want to win. Right. A guy said to me one time, "Hey, do you think fear is a useful emotion?" I thought about it for a second, because I've heard lots of different people talk about fear and this and that, and I would say for Maybe I'll change this one day, but right now, this is where I've come to on fear. Maybe for the caveman who's walking through the jungle and they get attacked by the saber-toothed tiger, and that fear, that fight or flight response is enough to make him react in a moment in order to avoid being slashed by the tiger. But other than that, fear was not effective in battle because you do not make good decisions when acting in fear. And you have a better chance of survival, you make better decisions, and you have a better chance of winning and defeating and crushing the enemy when you remain calm. You do the OODA loop, right? Observe, orient, decide, act.
Yeah. I get asked. I obviously get asked about fear a lot, and I always say, look, fear is not a bad thing because it's the thing that makes you go, okay, I need to be ready.
Right.
It's the thing that makes you rehearse. It's the thing that makes you say, okay, and for me, again, the fear wasn't about the fear of getting killed, getting blown up. The fear was always about I don't want to do a bad job. I don't want to make a bad decision. That, I'll tell you, you're in a leadership position, that is the heaviest fear that you have is I make a mistake, my team does something that doesn't bring credit upon us as a unit. And by that, I mean, doesn't do a good job. Like you're just, I don't even know where that comes from. It's just want to do a good job. And the fear is, hey, I hope I don't do anything that gets my guys hurt or killed. I hope I don't do anything that's a bad decision that hurts us strategically as a nation.
Yeah.
Those are the two fears that I think make you rehearse, make you practice, make you reinforce, make you aware of what's happening. But what you can't do. I mean, for me, fear makes me aggressive. Like, oh, I think this guy's gonna do something to me. Cool. I'm afraid of him. Cool. I'm gonna attack him. I'm gonna kill him. I'm gonna take him out. I'm gonna do something. And I actually see that time. I see that in MMA too, where when you see someone happen to somebody where they get a little bit rocked or something. If they let that fear make them back off and go into a defensive mode, it's exactly what you just said. If it makes you into a defensive mode, the person's gonna, because man, you can smell that.
That's right.
You can smell that. So when I think the reaction to fear is like, oh, I'm afraid right now, cool, I'm gonna attack. I have to attack.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I don't feel comfortable about where the troop is moving right now or where my squad is moving right now. I don't think it's a good thing. Cool, I'm gonna attack. I'm gonna take some high ground. I'm gonna maneuver. That's
healthy.
Yes,
that's
healthy fear.
That's healthy. But you're also trained and prepared mentally for that kind of thing. Most people, when they start acting in fear, they start making poor decisions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So
absolutely.
In that sense, it's like, hey, get over your fears, because you have to recognize that when you're acting in fear, you'll have a less desirable outcome than if you can get over it, calm down, sip, observe, orient, decide, act.
Yep. No doubt about it. All right. What about just plain leadership challenges? I mean, here we are, stressful deployment.
Yep.
It was the most stressful deployment that anybody had up until that point in Iraq.
Yeah.
And even talking to, the Vietnam guys, this was a stressful deployment.
Yeah.
A very stressful deployment in the amount of combat that was happening.
Well, urban combat things happen so fast.
Yep. But from a leadership perspective, was there anything that you didn't expect? Was there any lesson that got confirmed?
Yeah. So, and it's funny because, over time in the deployment, you really mature, even in a short amount of time. And I'll give you a quick story. So it was one of my last ops before I left country. And there was another unit that had come in to kind of partner up with us. And we went and did this op. And so the officer in that unit, who's a good friend of mine, by the way, it might have been his second combat op, right? And so I've been on, I don't even know how many at that point. And so we went and did this operation, and it involved some Army units, and so we're sitting in this position, and so like classic blunder, the Army guy who's sitting there is on the rooftop, and he's smoking a cigarette, like the classic World War II sniper victim, smoking a cigarette, trail of smoke going up, and this is classic. Single sniper shot, shoots him, and it misses his face. Well, let me put it this way: it took his earlobe off. Right, round cracks into the wall behind us. That's it. Immediately, everybody just just unloads firefight, right? And so we're calling in medevac for this guy because it still cut him pretty good. And trying to figure out if there's going to be any more fire, whatever the situation is. So this guy's like, well, I'm like, hey, so time to call the QRF and get out of here. He's like, well, I think, I'm like, you think what, dude? What else do you think is possibly going to come from this? And, I probably would have thought, hey, maybe we can still get something from this. It was my first or second, right? But it was just clear, at this point, we've already got a lot of guys hurt on this deployment. We've already lost Mark and a few other guys. Biggles has already been shot at this point. So you have to weigh, what more are you going to gain? First of all, this sniper just got a bead on this guy. And by the grace of God, he is still alive. And we've shot so what else is going to happen? They're either just going to set up and get a better position or get another shot, but they certainly aren't going to do anything. We certainly aren't going to see anything that they don't want us to see at this point. So the battlefield is lost. This op it's over. It's time to pull chocks and go. So anyway, the Army came and busted down the swamp with the fighting vehicle. It was awesome. I love the Bradley fighting vehicle.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's just sort of like a quick. It's obvious. It's obvious to me at that point. And on a Monday morning, quarterback 10 years later, as I'm explaining this, anybody's listening can go, well, yeah, obviously time to go, right? But you know what? You're in that position, and guys are still trying to get after it, and there's still things going on out there. You might think, well, maybe there's still something we can do here.
Yeah. And by the way, there was other times where similar situations happened and different decisions were made, and they worked out great.
Yep.
And so I think your overall statement is you gained perspective
right
over time, and you were able to look at things from a better perspective and from higher altitude, for a lack of a better way to say it. You were able to understand what was happening on the battlefield more.
Yep.
And that's definitely something that if people are listening and it's something that they want to become aware, it's something that you can actually act on, because that perspective, it can be gained through time and experience, but it can also be gained by detachment and saying, okay, what am I really doing here right now?
Yeah.
What are we really going to gain? And you can make a faster progress down the line to make good judgment calls based on not just experience, but just on knowledge and trying to capture the right perspective at the right time.
Plus, a big tactic for those guys was slowly evolving and happened after we left.
So is there anything else that that you learned, again, that you didn't expect or that was useful for you from a leadership perspective?
Yeah, so, I found myself in a position a lot of times of kind of keeping the platoon stitched together, because in an intense situation, guys start to have different opinions about things,
They do indeed.
Yeah. And so on this deployment, I was not the platoon commander, right? My good friend was the platoon commander. And when you're in a position of leadership, you're making a lot of hard decisions. And not everybody always agrees with the decision that gets made. And so a lot of times the role I needed to fill was to back my platoon commander and continue to keep the platoon together behind the platoon commander, because he was tasked with making some hard decisions. So sometimes it was, so look, the analogy I would give to you is that you may be in a role in a company, in an organization, where the best thing you can do to be part of the team is to help keep the team on focus for the mission. And that might mean, spending some time with one or two guys who are over here having a disagreement about the decision or which way things are going.
Yeah. And truly, one of the best ways that you end up having to do that or doing that is, number one, you build the relationships with the guys,
right?
So they know and trust you. Number two, your platoon commander is got a lot of stuff on his plate,
right?
And so one of the easiest things for him to cut short is the guys of explaining, hey, here's why this is going on, here's why this is going to. So you, as the intermediary, saying, okay, right, I know what he's doing, I know why he's making this decision, let me explain this down the chain of command.
That's right.
And that's so helpful, so helpful.
And when you've got guys in a platoon or any organization, a high-performing organization, that are really strong-willed and have strong opinions, and by the way, are intelligent and can make really articulate points as to why they don't agree with something. Again, my role in that situation was to ensure that mission success continued to happen, that we were still effective as a unit, and that meant me kind of behind the scenes trying to keep some guys on board.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I'm sure people have noted this already, but when you said there's these different people inside of a platoon, I mean, just if you listen to the podcast that I just did with retired Senior Chief Tony Afrati, and you guys' personalities are very, very different. Right. Very, very different. And that's just some of what you get in a SEAL platoon. And you know what? It's not just some of what you get in a SEAL platoon. It's some of what you get in any organization.
That's right.
There's no clones. There's not
right.
people being turned out. They can have the same background. They can go to the same school. They can have the same level of experience. They can be totally different people. That's the way it is. And that's the way it is in the SEAL teams. And that's the way it is in every organization.
It's part of why we're so good, right? Because you got guys that think differently. They look at problems differently.
Yes.
Right?
But I like the fact of what you're saying is you found yourself in the role of, okay, you know what? I got to make sure that the guys understand where the platoon commander's coming from. With the guy that if there's something that actually makes sense, I got to bring it back to the platoon commander and say, look, this isn't one of the guys, complaining about something. Here's the legitimate point that's being made.
Right.
And then you guys can have that discussion. Maybe brings in one of those guys and says, okay, tell me what you're talking about here. And then you guys can move forward and come up with the best possible plan. But yeah, as a peacemaker, for all practical purposes, is where you end up being, and what the one other peacemakers needed, because there wasn't a lot of peace over there, not a lot of peace, and one of the stories I think that little Mikey story here that kind of shows you the level of violence that was happening in Ramadi. So I came to visit because I was on the other side of Ramadi, and the guys from Delta, first a small section of guys from Delta, and then all of them ended up on the eastern side of Ramadi with the 506 Band of Brothers. Awesome, outstanding unit, amazing guys to a man, and with an amazing commander. But so Delta platoon ended up over there. Well, anyways, I had gone over to visit, go do some ops with them and see what was going on. And when I showed up, and this is probably like a month and a half in, because the guys had taken over some crappy building and
Full Metal Jacket,
and had built it out FMJ. So if you guys seen the movie Full Metal Jacket, that's a scene in the movie where these buildings are all blown out. Well, this building where not just the SEALs, but a bunch of guys, Army guys, lived in this building, and it was all blown out, and it looked like this.
It's awesome.
It was awesome. It looked like Full Metal Jacket. And when we first got in there, when we first went out there, it was dirt. It was literally dirt floors, just mosquitoes everywhere. It was just horrible. And now some time had passed, and the guys, of course, you put SEALs somewhere, they're going to dial some stuff in.
Dude, so the CBs that we had,
the
awesome.
CBs we had.
Oh my gosh,
the CBs we had were phenomenal. And if you don't know what CBs are, they're sort of the Navy's version of engineers, and they're fanatically hard workers. And the crew that we had with us in Ramadi, they were part of our task unit. They were just total hard chargers and bust their ass and make stuff happen. So they had, and the other thing you have to do when you're a CB is you have to learn to acquire things, because there's a lack of things in a combat zone.
That's right.
And so your good CB can come up with, let's call it, 120 sheets of 4x8 plywood.
Right. That our CB Master Chief was awesome.
Yeah.
When we got there, dude, they had these racks built out for us in this blown out concrete building that had like shelves and stairs to go to the upper. Dude, it was awesome.
Yeah, it was. So that's what they had done, is taken and just built into these basically small plywood condominiums inside Full Metal Jacket.
That's right.
And I showed up there one time, and we're hanging out, and the platoon commanders give me a little debrief on stuff and just kind of tell me how things are going. And then someone says, "Hey, did you see Mikey's video?" And I go, "No." And they go see Mikey's video. And so I go, okay. So they go, his room's back there. And what does his room say on it?
Oh, man.
Like Mikey's Palace or something like
so
that?
I've got a great story about Mikey's Palace, by the way. So
go ahead. Let's hear about Mikey's Palace.
So the CBs had built these awesome plywood paradise for us. And so, people would sleep. We would sleep at all different times, right? I mean, daytime, nighttime, whatever, because the op cycle was so intense. And so everything was totally blacked out. And I got like an odd sleeping style. Like I could Well, as a mole rat, we have a slightly different cycle. So Mikey had a different cycle. Like everybody would be asleep and I would be awake and I'd be like, I always could find Mikey awake. And Mike, so you go in, he was on the ground floor. And so you go down and it was pitch black and you'd have to like feel your way through it, all these bunks. And then you'd go down around this corner, down this hallway, and you make a sharp right. And then there'd be this faint glow coming from Mikey's palace. And so Mikey's bunk was the last one up against the wall. And there was like an extra like 3 feet between his bunk and the wall, just the way it worked out. And so he had like these tapestries that his family had sent him hanging from the wall. And he'd have like poncho liners all hung out, blocking the whole thing out. And so it was all dark. It was like his little cave. And you go back in there, and I don't know where he got them, but he had like extra pillows on his bunk. And like he had his laptop like rigged as like a TV screen if you always be watching movies, and he always had all kinds of geedunk back there. So I go back in there and I go in the glow from Mikey's palace. I go back in there and then we just sit there. He'd go, hey man, you want some of the? He'd have beef jerky, he'd have sodas, he'd have like ramen noodles, and he had like this heating element, like ones like you plug into the wall. Yeah. He'd be like, hey man, and he'd like hook up the heating element, boiling water right there with some ramen. I mean, if ever I was hungry in the middle of the night, I could get down there to Mikey's palace. I knew I could get some grub, and he and I'd hang out and watch movies and stuff. And he was always up weird hours like me, and it was just cool, man. He had this, it was cool. Pictures, posters hanging on the wall. He had that thing tricked out.
Dialed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so these guys are like, hey, have you seen Mikey's movie? And I go, no. So they go, well, go back to Mikey's palace and check it out. And so I make my way back there, same thing. You're making your way back there in the dark, got the headlamp on, even though it's noon or something like that outside, but the place is blacked out. Anyways, I get back there, and I'm like, Mikey. And he didn't know I was at Corregidor, you know? Yeah. So he was just, hey, kind of like hop to or whatever in a very, I don't want to make that sound too extreme, but he was surprised to see the commander, right? But anyways, I'm like, Mikey, he's like, hey, and he's all chill. And I said, hey, let me see your movie, man. And he gets a smile on his face, and I go, okay, this must be interesting. So anyways, he breaks out his camera. He's showing me the movie on the camera, right? But it's got volume, and I'm sitting there watching it. And anyways, the movie it's a big firefight going on. It's just a big bad firefight. There's machine gun fire going off, and he's literally sticking his hand up with the camera above the edge of a rooftop, and he's filming. You can see stuff getting shot and whatever. And then the funny part is he brings the camera down. He's hiding in this rooftop, and he points the camera at himself. And the area of Ramadi that they were working in was a place called the Malab District. And like many things in the military, it had taken on its own little life, its own little legend, the Malab District. And Mikey points the camera at himself, and he says, "It's the Mulab." The Mulab, baby. The Mulab, baby. And so it was really funny. And I get done watching this, and of course I'm still, Mr. Big Bad Jocko. And I get done watching it, and I go, hey, Mikey, listen, bro, when you're out there, you shouldn't be filming stuff. You need to be on your gun. I mean, that's just what you need to be doing. You need to get on your gun, and you need to keep shooting. You need to be putting down suppressive fire. And he looks at me, and he's kind of sheepishly, because he felt bad. And he goes like, hey, sir, I was out of ammo. and I started laughing because that's probably 800 rounds of
maybe more.
Probably more.
1,200.
Probably 1,200.
Yeah.
Just a massive amount of machine gun rounds that he had gone through, and he had shot them all. That's what Winchester means. Means you had nothing left. And he said, sir, sorry, sir, I was Winchester. And I just started laughing. I was like, well, if you're Winchester, make some good movies then, I guess, my brother.
He got after it.
Yeah. So that's another good Mikey story.